Hello everyone, welcome to another art time lapse. Today I'll be going over this piece called Unravel. Now I know I've been trying a lot of new things lately with my gouache. As always, I've always enjoyed using acrylic gouache, so I'm using Holbein acrylic gouache for this piece. I started in the evening, so you can see the lighting's not great, but we're going to transition to daytime and you'll see the painting a little bit better. I start off by using a bit of blues and apricots and then adding plenty of water to the piece, and then so you can see that there's more of a watercolor effect associated with gouache. Once the layer is dry, I add on more gouache with subsequently less water proportion, and I just keep layering it on. Now this piece is about unraveling. I feel that nowadays there's just a lot of things that's been added to the plate and it's getting a bit overwhelming from time to time, and I feel myself unraveling like a spool of thread. At times I catch myself kind of making sure that I'm breathing and just trying to stay calm, but at the same time I know that for myself I really need to surrender to this busyness and not try to control everything. So that's just what this piece is about, just surrendering to this unraveling and this busyness that happens and just letting things go and letting things be. And you can see this girl, she's resting. She has her eyes closed and she's just surrendering to what's happening and just being calm and settled. And I think it's just understanding that things are gonna happen and you can't control every single detail related to life, and that's okay. Here, I know that she looks really dark and blotchy, but as I layer on a little bit more gouache, hopefully her face will light up a little bit. You can see that overall the piece is quite messy because I feel like unraveling is a messy process. It's not super clean, but that's okay. You know how when you paint sometimes there's a certain time in your painting when it's it doesn't look very good and you're thinking, should I go on? And I must admit, this process happens to me for every single one of my painting, where you get to a part where it just looks really ugly and you just have to push through and trust the process and hope for the best. And I feel like this doesn't necessarily just apply to painting, it applies to a lot of things in life, that things may not look perfect before it gets better. It's gonna look ugly and things are gonna look messy, but it's all part of the process, that you won't appreciate what you have until you've had probably a poor experience or had a disorganized experience. Lack of better wording for it, I must say I'm not the best person with words, because as you can see, I paint a lot. I'm better expressing myself with my art than I am with my words. Here I'm adding on a little bit of magenta. So the piece predominantly is a lot of blues and green hues, and I decided to add a little bit of red and violet colors to add more depth to the piece. I never really used truly black dark colors for shadowing, because I feel like you can add so much depth to the piece by just mixing in different shades of color, like a cobalt blue or magenta. I know that this piece, after I finish with my gouache, I'm going to use a little bit of oil pencils to add in the details, and that's one of the great things of using gouache or acrylic gouache, because once it's dry it's matte, so it works really well with a variety of mixed media. Here I'm just adding in a few more kind of stringy unraveling, kind of merges with her hair, that kind of is plopped out beside her or unraveling beside her. I've done a piece like this back in 2019 a little bit. It's black and white on craft paper, but I wanted to do something that was more colored. If you can see from my recent pieces, I've been doing a lot more gouache of messy pieces of portraits. Every single piece I try to involve a story, and a lot of the story ideas come from myself about like my emotions and like um, thoughts and feelings and messages to my children now that I'm going through this kind of new motherhood stage. So I hope you've been liking the content on the channel so far. I should mention, like as always, if you enjoy the content on this channel, please consider like, subscribe, and sharing. It really help with the channel. Here I'm doing a super fast art time lapse to show you the process of how I paint this piece. I must say, back in the day before I had kids, a piece like this I will probably spend an entire day and get it done, but nowadays it probably takes me around 3 to 4 weeks to finish a piece. I try to do it in between their naps, so a lot of times I don't get to sit down and do it all in one go. Here I'm adding in a darker background because I think it will make the girl stand out a little bit more, because I do want her to be the center of the piece. Here I'm just dabbing a little bit of turquoise light colors from the acrylic gouache lid itself. I would say this is not something I would generally recommend. I would recommend squeezing your paint onto a soy sauce dish or some kind of paint mixer instead of dabbing directly from the lid, because what happens is once you mix water with acrylic gouache and it dries, it turns gritty, and you don't want later on to put the cap back onto your paint and when you're squeezing the paint out to have this grittiness on your paper. But for me, like, I guess I was just a little bit lazy at the time, and I thought, oh, you know what, I just want a little bit of light green, I'll be done. And then at the end I end up using a lot more than I thought. So you can see from the piece, a lot of times I go from darker colors to lighter shades. So now that I've added the darker background, I'm adding in some lighter highlights, and then I kind of go back and forth, and now I'm just adding in some shadows again. And my painting process is a lot of going back and forth and just revisiting, looking at the piece. It's like, where are the highlight, where are the darkness, where's the light coming from, and something I have to constantly remind myself. For the majority of these finer details, I use a finer paintbrush that I pick up from my local art store, Opus Art Supplies, which I really love. So if you're ever in Vancouver, Victoria, British Columbia, and this area in Canada, definitely check them out. I find that their staff is pretty super friendly. This video, by the way, is not sponsored by them, but I just simply love their service. And yeah, here just adding a bit more unraveling. I'm still kind of debating about what kind of expression I want her to have on her face while she's resting. Is she struggling? Is she happy? Is she maybe just indifferent? Something I can aim for. So these pieces slowly come into play. I'm still debating like how this piece will work in the grand scheme of, like, if someone was to pick up this piece, like what would they do with it? Where would they have it shown? I feel like it's more of an artistic piece than a beauty piece that's like of nature that you would put in your living room. But at this point in my artist career, I feel like it's more important to kind of have a message related to piece than just having another quote-unquote beautiful piece that's related to nature or like trees to have to display. I really want each piece to have a message and a story. Perhaps someone can relate to it, or it could be a good starting point for a conversation. Well, I'm just about to wrap up the gouache version, and I'm going to use my oil pencils to kind of blend in. And you can see I'm using a Prismacolor. This one is actually a wax pencil for blending, but I usually use oil pencils to do the preliminary details before adding in my wax pencil for blending. So here's the finished piece. Thank you so much for following along on this art time lapse for Unravel. I had a wonderful time putting this piece together. It took a while, but I think it came out quite well. If you enjoy these types of videos, please consider like, subscribe, and sharing. Well, that's it for now. Thank you for joining me on this journey on this art time lapse for Unravel. I'll see you next time. Stay safe and stay creative, everyone. Bye for now.